we're going to simulate our testing a repaired pump. First thing we're going to do is take our fast fittings, put our hoses in, our air, exhaust, and discharge, put our clips in. From that point, we'll just take our pump, drop it down into our testing vat. Once we've got that in there, the first thing we want to make sure before we ever get started is making sure our air is shut off, our obviously our air is turned all the way down, and then our slow discharge valve is shut. So our first step will be turning on our air. We'll go from there and turn our regulator up. Once you get to about 5-10 pounds of pressure, you'll hear the shuttle and the pump seal, and you kind of get started from there. We'll get it at about 40 pounds. From there, take our slow discharge valve and slowly open it. Want to make sure not to open it too fast so we don't cause too much water to go back into the holding tank. So hear the pump pumping steadily. We run our air up to anywhere between 80 and 100. There's really no max that most any compressor by itself is going to allow. But anywhere between 80, 100, 120, whatever your compressor allows will be fine. We'll get it, hear it pumping 5 or 6 times by itself with no head pressure. We'll turn our slow discharge valve down. And what this is going to simulate is head pressure on the pump. We'll notice here we have a gauge showing our head pressure at 100 psi, and it should always match our air pressure gauge up here. So once we see we're running 100 psi head pressure, the goal is to keep this test at about 20 seconds before we discharge again. What we're going to find out with this slow discharge test, putting the head pressure on the pump, is going to really cause us to find out if any of our valves are off. Our exhaust valve may be too loose or even too tight, or our air valve may be too loose or too tight. But if we fail during this test, our first thing to go to is going to be to look at our valves to kind of make sure those are right, and this should be a dead giveaway for that. So we can hear it discharging through our pipe here. Like I said, anywhere between 20 and 25 seconds of a head pressure there should be fine. So once we've let that pump through a couple times, we'll open it up, let it pump freely again. From there, we want to go down to our slow fill valve and turn it down. What this is going to simulate is the recharging of a well. So if you pump your well down, you have your well recharging, it's going to come up slower. It will simulate that, and then we'll be able to find out if our magnets are at all off. It's going to throw it off here, because normally when you're pumping you may be fine, but it may stall during a recharge if your magnets or your flow adjustment's off, because it's not got that force raising the force of the water coming up quickly, raising the rocker up and causing it to trip. So one thing we can look for is if we've stood here for a minute or two and it's not pumped, we look inside of our vat and see that our water level has come up above our head. We know it's stalled, and we need to take it back down and find out what our problem is. But we'll let that pump once or twice, and like I said, anywhere from 20 seconds to 40 seconds, or even if you cut it down to a trickle, it's not going to matter. You're still going to be simulating that slow fill of the well. So, but once we've let it pump once or twice to see that it's all running right, we'll open that back up, let it pump a few times, and we're going to go back to our slow discharge valve from there. And cut it all the way down. Again, verify that our head pressure is matching up with our air pressure. And the purpose for this test is to check. We'll look inside of our vat. If there's any bubbles coming, you'll see maybe you've got an O-ring that's gone bad, or the casing's messed up, didn't tighten your fast fit downs all the way. You'll be able to see where the bubbles are coming from and be able to adjust that accordingly. If you're leaking a lot of air through your exhaust, but you don't see any bubbles and the pump's pumping by itself, most likely you'll have a problem with your bottom check valve, and we'll be able to show how to find that out for sure here in just a second. But we've checked for any bubbles, making sure it's all good. So open the discharge up slowly again, let it pump once or twice, and then what we want to do is go ahead and shut it back down right after a pump. From there, we'll pull our pump itself out. And this is where you will be able to find out if you indeed did have any leaks in your bottom check valve, whether your screw holes or your shuttle's gone bad. You'll be able to tell here because you'll have water streaming out with this pump being under as much pressure as it is. Once we've made sure there's no leaks there, we'll open up our slow discharge valve to release any pressure on the pump, and then push our shuttle up to release any excess water out. Take our pump, set it back down. One thing we want to ensure before we do anything else after we take our pump out is we want to make sure that we turn our air all the way back down to 0. And then after we get that, double check ourselves by cutting our air off. That way when we're taking our fast fittings off of our pump, we're not having all that pressure on them and from there causing it to injure someone. So after we close that valve and turn our air down, we'll close our discharge valve, get the test station ready to pump our next one.